ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ትችላላችሁ።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ ጥያቄና መልስ የክፍል ስራዎች ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁት አይነት በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ ከናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
Hello everyone, እንዴት ናችሁ? I hope we have been discussing some of the highlights of the chapter. So chapter 6 deals about financing a business or business finance. So there are different financing strategies in startup stage, which means business financing means contributing different types of finance to generate a working capital or a fixed asset or plant asset, or in some cases permanent financing. Permanent financing is a little bit advanced forms of finance, which means selling equity for investors is a permanent finance. So in this case, there are different financial requirements. All business need money to finance the host of different requirements. Any business organization require different hosts, or they need different money for different purpose. So the first purpose why business organization need money is to finance permanent capital, which means they can generate finance through selling different equity. Equity means common share, selling the ownerships of the organization, either in the form of common share or preferred share. This common share or preferred share is known as equity finance. So in this case, so as to get money, business organizations sell their ownership for investors. So generating money in the form of selling their equity is known as permanent capital financing. And the other is they need working capital. They need this working capital is responsible for generation of an income, directly generates an income. So in this case, they need a finance to or they need money to finance the working capital part of their asset, purchasing raw material, inventory, or so this forms of financing most of the time is short term. So they can get money in the form of taking raw materials on credit. So in this case, this form of requirement or forms of finance is working capital, or small business most of the time reimburse or fill the gap between when they get paid and when they have to pay for the suppliers. There is some overhead costs. So to reimburse the overhead costs, they need a short-term loan. This short-term loan is working capital. Or sometimes business require money or need money to finance long-term assets. This long-term asset is purchasing machineries, plant asset, or equipment or texture, fixture. There are a number of fixed assets. So companies require or need some amount of money in long-term basis to purchase machineries, equipment, and so on. So how a business organization get a long-term loan from others? So in this case, this long-term loan is just to purchase fixed assets or to finance the company's asset, which is lasts 3 up to 10 years. This is an asset. So all business organizations require money or need money to get these three things. One, to finance permanent capital, to finance working capital, to finance fixed asset or asset financing. So in this case, this is the requirement why business organization need money. So this money is generated from different sources. What are those sources? Generally, we can classify the source of finance into two basic sources. One, internal, the other is external sources. The internal source is known as equity finance. Equity finance is simply generated by the entrepreneur themselves, as well as they can get money from their relatives, from their friends, or from investors by saving some amount of share, either for venture capitalists or angel capitalists. So in this case, we will discuss the details of the source of finance. So you have to identify which source of finance is appropriate for an organization, which source, if possible. So in this case, we'll see what are the major sources. So in this case, once we determine the source of finance, so the purpose of the finance is important, the purpose. You may borrow money for short-term purpose. You may borrow money for long-term purpose. So in this case, if you borrow money for long-term purpose, you are going to purchase machinery, equipments, fixtures, texture, or plant assets. If you borrow money for a short period, so you can finance or you can purchase either materials, raw materials, or supplies. So in this case, first we have to determine the source of finance and where this finance is, applicable, where. So in this case, managing assets or the source of finance is important. We have to manage effectively and efficiently the assets of the organization. Efficient utilization of the resources is important in finance, efficient utilization. So in this case, to efficiently utilize the resources, most of the time financial resource, first we have to plan where these resources is applicable, or we have to invest in which assets of the organization, either in short term or long term. So in order to generate sales, most important asset of the organization is the inventories and the facilities. So in this case, we have to invest some amount of money in inventory or in some facilities like plant asset, machinery, and so on. And we have to get an access for each resources. We have to make some access. So in this case, we have to develop a plan where the generated resources are, allocated. These generated resources are, obviously financial resource. So in this case, the critical issue in financing a business is to assure sufficient cash flow for the operation. We have to ensure, unless we do have, sufficient cash flow within the operation, there might be some shortage of raw material, there might be some shortage of financing long-term assets. There might be a shortage of additional investment on the organization. So the critical issue in financing a business is we have to ensure that the business has sufficient cash flow within the operation. Cash flow could be inflow or outflow, but it should be sufficient. So in this case, to ensure the sufficiency of cash flow within the operation, so we have to determine the source of finance. The source of finance. Obviously, the source of finance within one organization is three. Or, the cash flow comes from three sources, the cash flow. One, from operating income. Operating income. You can produce a product, sell a product, and you can generate an income. So that is operation or operational income. And the other could be finance. You can get money from the other sources through borrowing or credit purchase and so on. And the other source of finance for the organization could be selling existing resources, selling. If you do have extra vehicle within the organization, you can sell that extra vehicle and you can generate an income, or that is known as a gain. So in this case, there are three sources of cash flow within the organization. So which one is the most important cash flow? Sources could be operating income. An income generated from the operation of the organization is important. So in this case, anyways, we have to know the sources, where it comes from, where. So the financial resource can be generated internally, or internal source of finance is known as equity capital. So the owner's capital or owner's equity represents the personal investment of the owner. So you can personally invest from your pocket, from your account to the business. This investment or the personal investment of the owner or the entrepreneur is, we can make, this is equity capital. But equity capital is not only from the owner's investment only. It includes other investments. If the owner gets, empty pocket once they invest in the business, they are turning around to their family to get some amount of loan or to get some amount of support, or turning to their friends and to relatives and so on. So in this case, investment from the investor himself or from the owner himself is an equity, as well as relatives investment. If your relative or friends lend money for your investment, so that could be considered as equity capital or internal sources. So in this case, there are different internal sources, or this could be a partner. If you don't have enough money, so you have to looking for a partner who contributes some amount of capital. So investment by partner is an internal source of finance, or it could be equity finance. And the other forms of equity finance could be, if the three options, or if you reach these three options and still you need some amount of money, so you have to go to the market, you have to go to the public, which means prepare shareholders or prepare share, particularly common share, and sell to the public, sell to the market. So in this case, selling a share to the public is public offering. Public offering. This public offering is considered as an internal equity or simply internal source of finance. So this four, in addition to the angel capitalist and venture capitalist, this is investors. So a business organization can generate money or finance from different sources. One, equity. So equity includes the investment or personal investment from the entrepreneur himself, from his friends or relatives, or sometimes selling investment or public offering to the public. Public offering means simply prepare some amount of agreement to sell the ownership to the market. So within the internal sources, we can classify the public offering or public stock sales as internal sources, which means prepare stock and sell to the public, open. So you have to provide to the open market. The other forms of internal finance is angel capitalist. Angel capitalist means simply individuals, entrepreneurs, willingly to support the startup business by providing some amount of money in exchange of some equity. Equity means some ownership. But what this individual makes different from other investors or venture capitalists is they are supporting the business at startup stage. They expect some reasonable amount of equity and return on the new business, rather than expecting high amount of return and high equity position. So some investors, lend money for startup business and expecting something in return which is high. This indicates so their intention is to take over the business at all, at the end of the day. But angel capitalists or individuals are someone willingly support the entrepreneur at startup stage without expecting high equity, position. So just, providing the money to support the entrepreneur. So their ultimate objective is supporting the business, not taking the business. But venture capitalists sometimes support the entrepreneur ultimately to take over the business, Or if they didn't take over the business, but they expect huge amount of return, or they expect the majority vote of the business, majority votes, or the majority share. So in this case, there is some individuals who support the entrepreneur, just to support the entrepreneur. There are also venture capitalists, but these capitalists are organizations. This business organization expect some amount of return or huge amount of return from the new startup. So in this case, these investors conduct some pre-feasibility study before providing the money. If the money or if the startup is promising, so they can provide the money. If the business or the startup is not as such promising, so they may not provide the money. But angel capitalists are private investors, regardless of the business status in the future, so they can provide support for the entrepreneur at startup level. So they expect a medium level return. So this is some of the internal sources. internal sources. So in this case, to personally invest in your business, which is the first source of an equity or capital. So we have to make some saving, personal saving. What does mean saving? Can you tell me what's saving? Do you have a personal saving? Yes? Anyone? Do you have some amount of money, personal saving for your future investment? Saving and investment is, two important concepts in business startup. To start a new business, first you have to have some amount of personal saving. So what's saving? Anyone who can respond about saving, since saving is, one of the initial background for, startup business, the initial, or simply the backbone of any investment is saving. So that's why you may hear a number of an advertisement every day about saving in our banking industry. Saving ምን ማለት ነው? እስኪ ንገረኝ።
In my opinion, I think when I describe saving mathematically, it is income minus expenditure. Means the amount of money we keep for the future after using or after we spend some amount of money for our daily life or for necessity things.
Okay. So you get some amount of income monthly, and from that income, so you have to take some amount of monthly expenses, personal expenses. The difference between your income and your monthly expenditure is a saving. So where did you put the money?
No, in my private bank account, saving account.
Yeah. So saving is simply putting some amount of money in the safest place. Sometimes don't consider, the traditional form of saving. So traditionally, people sometimes use different types of saving mechanism. But, in a modern term, saving means, putting some amount of money in the safest place while it generates some amount of income. So in this case, we have to, put our money in the safest place while it generates an income. That income is, deposit interest rate. So in this case, you can put some amount of money in a bank or other financial institution, and, generate some amount of income. That income is deposit interest rate. In Ethiopian case, what's the deposit interest rate, annual deposit interest rate? ሰው አለ ለምሳሌ 100 ብር ብታስቀምጡ አንድ ባንክ ውስጥ በአመት ስንት ብር መውለድ ይችላል? እስኪ ንገረኝ። Minimum deposit rate. The minimum deposit rate issued by the National Bank of Ethiopia. Minimum ማለት ነው። ከዛ በላይ ለምሳሌ ያው ፕራይስ ታውቃላችሁ አይደል? አንዱ የስትራቴጂ ነው። ምናልባት ያለፈው ቻፕተር ላይ አንዱ ፕራይሲንግ ስትራቴጂ አለ። ሰዎችን አትራክት የምናደርግበት በዋጋ ነው። እኛ የምንከፍለው ዋጋ ከሌሎች የተሻለ ከሆነ ሰዎችን መሳብ እንችላለን። ስለዚህ ሚኒመም just for general purpose to understand how much you are going to earn if you deposit or if you save 100 in a bank. So what's the minimum? The minimum interest rates. Okay. በፐርሰንት ሲቀየር ስንት ማለት ነው? ኦኬ እሺ 3%. 0%. እሺ ሌላ
I think it's zero ከወለድ ነፃ የሚባሉ አገልግሎቶች አሉ።
of course zero on average ለምሳሌ አሁን አንድ ቢዝነስ ኦርጋናይዜሽን የራሱ የሆነ given that other things are exist ለምሳሌ ከወለድ ነፃ የሚፈልጉ አሉ ወለድ የሚፈልጉ 1% ስለዚህ ኢንፎርሜሽን እንዲኖራችሁ የኢትዮጵያ ንግድ ባንክ ወለድ ለሚከፈልባቸው ከወለድ ነፃ ሳይሆን ወለድ ለሚከፈልባቸው 7.5% ይከፍላል ሚኒመም ማለት 7.5 ከዛ በላይ እንግዲህ ያው it depends ለምሳሌ የተሻለ ወለድ ሰጥቶ የተሻለ ደንበኛ መሰብሰብ የሚፈልግ ካለ ከዛ በላይ መክፈል ይችላል ግን ከዛ በታች አይቻልም minimum standard is 7.5%. So if you deposit some amount of money personally in your saving account, so you will generate 7% interest rate. Or a return on investment will be 7.5. You know, return and risk is the two faces of one coin. The riskier the business, higher or you will get higher profits. So in this case, if the investment area is very safe, the interest rate is low, the interest rate. As the risk of the business is increased, the return on that investment is, it will be high. So in this case, if you deposit your money in the safest place, which is bank or any financial institution, so you will get the minimum interest rate or the minimum return on that investment. If you invest in high risky investment area, so you can get some amount of or higher amount of money or higher amount of interest. So in this case, there is some relationship between saving. As you make, saving, so you will accumulate huge amount of money. So the advantage of saving is simply to increase, the future demand. To meet the future demand. Sometimes, saving is the process of sacrificing the present consumption for a future consumption. That's saving. So you may sacrifice the present satisfaction just to accumulate or to postpone the future satisfaction or to get future satisfaction. So saving can be done, through small but regular deposits you can make. Or sometimes you can deposit automatically. Sometimes if you get some salary monthly, so you can make some deposits, automatically deducted from the monthly income by the employers. And you can make some amount of deposits. If you are working for, some organization, and that organization may deposit on behalf of their employees by, automatically deducting from their salary and make some deposit. So in this case, deposit can be small but in regular basis. ምናልባት በየወር ደሞዛችሁ ላይ 100 ብር ተካተራችሁ ሊሆን ይችላል and depending on the amount of income you get from the organization. So in this case, you can make different types of deposit automatically with small regular deposits. So in this case, there is some advantage on saving. What advantage you are going to get from saving? ምን ታገኛላችሁ? እስኪ advantage ሴቭ ብታረጉ የምታገኙት advantage ምንድን ነው? If you save some amount of money from your monthly salary, if you do have salary, ወይ ምናልባት ለሻይ ቡና ከሚሰጣችሁ ላይ እየቀነሳችሁ ብታጠራቅሙ የምታገኙት advantage ምንድን ነው?
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ MBA በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ MBA በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ MBA በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ MBA በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ MSc በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
So you can declare your financial independence. You can declare. So you will accumulate huge amount of money and you can free from the financial constraints. This is one advantage to make some deposits. Or you can meet the future need because the future is uncertain and your need may be fluctuate. So in the future, so you need to have some money to meet the future need or the future demand. So in this case, there are a number of advantages you can get from saving. So that's why financial institutions nowadays, promoting, the concept of saving. Every bank in Ethiopia, almost we can say every bank promote saving. You know why? They understood the advantage of saving. Saving is the base or the backbone of any investment. If you want to invest in the future, so first you have to save. You have to make some saving. So in this case, this is some of the advantages of saving. And there is some relationship between saving and investment. Unless you can make saving, or without saving, no investment. So the best for any investment, if you want to invest in a different investment portfolio or investment option, first you have to make some deposit, some saving. So this saving is important for the future investment. To meet the need of the money, you need to first deposit. An investment is simply spending some amount of money, expecting in the future some amount of profit or return. So now you are investing in yourself. Is that not? አሁን እየተማራችሁ ነው አይደል? ትምህርት ምንድነው ለሰዎች? Why you are learning? Why you are conducting your first degree? ለምንድን ነው የምትማሩት? እስኪ ታውቃላችሁ? አሁን ኢንቨስትመንት ነው። ኢንቨስት እያደረጋችሁ ነው በእናንተ ላይ ማለት ነው። You are spending some amount of money, some amount of time. You are spending your energy and so on. Investment in different forms. Investment. The most valuable investment is investing in human resource investing or investing in yourself. ለምሳሌ ዛሬ ገንዘብ የከፈላችሁ ማን አላችሁ? You are spending some amount of money, time, energy, and so on. So what do you expect from this investment?
I think directly or indirectly, our future life depends on it.
Yeah, it depends on your investment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more you invest in yourself, so you'll be benefited from that investment. ለምሳሌ በቀላሉ ልንገራችሁና ልክ ስትጀምሩ ሁለት አይነት መማር ትችላላችሁ አይደል? ዲፕሎማ መማር ትችላላችሁ በያዛችሁት ኳሊፊኬሽን ወይ ዲግሪ መማር ትችላላችሁ። ጊዜውም ገንዘቡም ይለያያል አይደል እንዴ? ለምሳሌ አሁን ዲግሪ ስንት ዓመት ነው የሚፈጅባችሁ? 4 ዓመት ሚኒመም። ዲፕሎማ ቢሆን 2 ዓመት ይፈጅባችኋል። ገንዘቡ ካልኩሌት ብታደርጉ በ2 ዓመት የምትከፍሉት በ4 ዓመት የምትከፍሉት። After graduation, so the return for diploma and the return for degree is different. Return ብታዩት ማለት ነው። ሪተርን ምናልባት እንደ ኢንቨስትመንት ስታዩት ከገንዘብ አንፃር ብታዩት ዲፕሎማ ያለው ሰው ሲቀጠር ያለው ደሞዝ እና ዲግሪ ያለው ሰው ሲቀጠር ያለው ደሞዝ it's quite different. ስለዚህ ኢንቨስትመንት እና saving, there is a strong relationship between these two words. Without saving, no investment. If you don't invest, so you will not have an income in the future. You will not have. So investment is simply spending some amount of money for generating an income in the future. So in relation with investment, there are some personal budgets. So personal budget is simply a finance plan that allocates future personal income towards an expense. Sometimes people may not consider their income and their expense. They may spend what they get monthly. Their expenditure sometimes exceed their income. From this get this, individual may not survive because even if they get some amount of money, if they spend more than that money, so no investment. No saving. If no saving, so no investment. So there will not be an income in the future. So in this case, we have to balance the personal income and the personal expenses, and take the difference. And the difference between the personal income and the personal expense could be a saving. So in this case, to balance our income and our expense, so we have to identify our source of income, identify the source of expenses. So the income source may be different, so you have to adapt all the source of income and get total monthly income or income per month. Track all daily expenses, weekly expenses, and monthly expenses. Your daily expense, you have to record. You have to record the weekly, the monthly expenses. And then, so you can categorize as monthly or weekly, or it could be daily expenses. And merge this into and divide by the category you can make. So in this case, you can balance your expense or cut your expense or adjust your expense in relation with the total income. So you can take the difference between the monthly income and the monthly expenses as saving. If your monthly income exceed your monthly expense, so you can have saving. What would happen? if the monthly expense exceed the monthly income. So you have to take these corrective actions. You have to take. ለምሳሌ ወራዊ ገቢያችሁ ከወራዊ ወጫችሁ ቢያንስ ሴቪንግ እንኳን ባይኖር የመጀመሪያ ማስተካከል ያለባችሁ you have to balance the monthly income with the monthly expenses and adjust your expense. Cut your expense. You have to cut back your expenses. ለምሳሌ ወራዊ ወጫችሁ 10,000 ብር ቢሆን ወራዊ ገቢያችሁ 8,000 ብር ቢሆን ኔጌቲቭ 2,000 ብር በየወሩ ብድር ይኖርባችኋል ማለት ነው። So you have to cut back at least to the amount of the monthly income and adjust this expense, and you have to make some saving. So saving, it could be, small but regular, or you can adjust to automatic deduction of salaries or wage or income to make some saving. So as an individual, as a business entrepreneur, you have to make some saving. Saving is important. Developed countries reach in this state or at this state because of investment. So we have to create some awareness about saving. Saving is important. To change your life, you have to make some saving. In this case, there are different saving mechanisms, as we have seen earlier. Small but in a regular basis, or automatically deducted from the salary you get. And you can increase or you can make better future. So this is the internal finance for any business, internal finance. So you may be asked to illustrate what are internal source of finance or internal capital, what's external. External, as the name implies, it's debt finance or debt capital. You can generate money by borrowing from the externals, borrowed capital, external finance, or you can call it as debt finance or debt capital, borrowed capital, you can name it. This external finance or small business owner has borrowed and must repay this interest. So in this case, where did you get the money? Where did you get, the money? Where did you get the loan? One, from commercial banks. Commercial, it could be government or private commercial banks. እስኪ commercial bank እንጠራለን እኛ ሀገር ውስጥ ያለው commercial bank. Name one or two. Mention two or one. Commercial bank. ብድር ከየት ልታገኙ ትችላላችሁ? ገንዘብ አንድ ድርጅት ራን ለማድረግ ብድር ከየት ልታገኙ ትችላላችሁ? አዲስ ብድር እና ቁጠባ ማይክሮፋይናንስ ኢንስቲትዩሽን። እሺ፣ ሌላ ኮመርሻል ባንክ የምንላቸውስ እነማን ናቸው?
Commercial Bank of Ethiopia.
That's government bank.
Yeah.
Lela?
Private bank.
Limat bank.
All private banks. All private banks. Commercial የምንላቸው commercial bank of Ethiopia የመንግስት ነው እና የግሎች ሙሉ commercial bank ናቸው። ሙሉ ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ እነሱ ጋር መውሰድ እንችላለን ለማድረግ to start our business. But there is some criteria. Commercial banks are, far the most frequently used source for short-term debt by the entrepreneur. But commercial banks in Ethiopian case is difficult for entrepreneurs. Why? ለምሳሌ ኢንተርፕረነር ሆነ ስንሄድ ይዘን የምንሄደው ምንድን ነው? የቢዝነስ ሀሳብ ነው ይዘን የምንሄደው እና የተወሰነ ብር ደግሞ ከዘመድ ከምናምን ቅድም ያየናቸው ወደ 6 ሶርስ አሉ። ከነዛ አድርገን ተጨማሪ በኤክስተርናል ፋይናንስ ማለት አቅማችን ማጎልበት እንፈልጋለን እና አንደኛው ኢንተርፕረነሮች ቢዝነስ አይዲያ ነው የሚሄዱት። ባንክ ደግሞ ለማበደር ምን ይጠይቃል? የመጀመሪያው
ኮላተራል ይጠይቃል።
ኮላተራል እንግዲህ ኮላተራል ማለት ደግሞ ፕሪቪሌጅድ ሪሶርስስ የምንላቸው ናቸው። ፕሪቪሌጅድ ሪሶርስስ ለምሳሌ የቤት ካርታ ሊሆን ይችላል፣ የመኪና ሊብሬ ሊሆን ይችላል፣ ሌሎች ትልልቅ ማሽነሪዎች እንደመያዣ ሊያደርግ ይችላል ብር ሲያበድር። ለዚህ ኢንተርፕረነሮች ደግሞ እንደዚህ አይኖራቸው በብዛት አይዲያቸው የነሱ ትልቁ ሪሶርሳቸው ማለት ነው እና ብዙ ጊዜ ባንኮች በእኛ በሌሎች ሀገሮችን ብዙ አላውቅም፣ ግን በእኛ ሀገር ኮንቴክስት ባንኮች ለኢንተርፕረነሮች ለማበደር ከፍተኛ የሆነ ቻሌንጅ ወይም አንተርፕረነሮች ከፍተኛ ቻሌንጅ ገጥሟቸዋል ከባንክ ለመበደር ማለት ነው። ቻሌንጁ ምንድነው? as you mentioned, banks require collateral, which is the privileged resources. So in this case, even if it's difficult for entrepreneurs to get loan from banks, but there are some banks nowadays emerging to provide short-term loan for entrepreneurs, short-term loan, which is, short-term loan without collateral, which is the most risky forms of business, most risky. So in this case, in most cases, commercial bank give loan for short-term, repaid within 1 year. A medium-term loan, 1 up to 5 years in between, or long-term, more than 5 years. So theoretically, banks provide 3 forms of loan for entrepreneurs. But practically, in Ethiopian case, there are few banks emerging to provide short-term loan for entrepreneurs, just for a working capital, without collateral. There are, so because of this limitation, microfinance institutions are emerging to provide loan for entrepreneurs. Since microfinance institution, and the name implies, they provide a small amount of loan, small amount. So in this case, entrepreneurs should ask themselves, different question to secure a bank loan. So what do you plan to do with the money? So they have to, if you remember in chapter 3, preparing a business plan. Prepare a business plan to secure the bank loan. Provide that proposal or business plan to the bank. So the proposal will describe, what the entrepreneur will do with the money. When do need it, or when do you need it, or when? So the business plan should show, the time period. For how long the money is needed. Is it for less than 1 year, to 1 up to 5 years, or more than 5 years? Should show. So in this case, how much do you need? The amount, how much money? There is an internal source, and in addition to the internal sources, the entrepreneur requires external fund. So in this case, first calculate the total amount of money required and how much needed by the bank or other financial institution, and how much financed through equity finance. So in this case, the entrepreneur should ask and describe in its business plan all these questions. So small business owners need to be aware of the bank criteria. The bank criteria are known as the 5C. The first C is known as the collateral. This collateral could be different types of assets or privileged assets, and how much capital they need. So this is the 5C criteria to get money from banks. If you fulfill this 5C, so you can get money from banks. If you fail to fulfill one of the 5C, if you fail, so it's difficult to get money from the bank. So the first criteria is capital. You have to show stable capital within the business. You have to show. So this stable capital guarantee the loan. It will develop confidence on the bank if you have stable capital. The capacity, the ability to convince the banks obligate or the bank's management, or capacity means the ability to repay the obligation of the bank or repay the loan. So that's why banks most of the time ask loan history of the entrepreneurs before they provide money, which is opposite to what? The philosophy of the Chinese company. And the China company, the China philosophy is like, let me tell you their philosophy. Look, the entrepreneurs, look in the angel capitalist or venture capitalist ነው ማለት ነው። መጀመሪያ ያበደሩት ሰው ቢከስር እና ድጋሚ ብድር ቢጠይቃቸው ይባላል። የነሱ ፊሎሶፊ ነው። እና ሁለት ሰው ብድር ቢጠይቃቸው መጀመሪያ ለከሰረ ሰው ያበድሩት፣ which is ከዚህኛው ባንክ በተቃራኒ ማለት ነው። እንግዲህ የከሰረ ሰው ማለት ከስተቱ ይማራል ብለው ያስባሉ በብዛት ማለት ነው። ድጋሚ አይከስርም ብለው ያስባሉ። ምክንያቱም ኢንተርፕረነሮች ምን ይባላል? አንዱ ካራክተሪስቲካቸው ምንድነው? እንታስታውሱት ከሆነ moderate risk takers ማለት moderate, and entrepreneurs take the first failure as a lesson, and they will take as a springboard for their success. So entrepreneurs believe failure is their lesson. So the Chinese also believe that someone who gets bankruptcy for the first time will not repeat that bankruptcy again. So in this case, they prefer to lend money for those who get bankruptcy in their history, rather than lending money for someone not experiencing bankruptcy. So in this case, opposite to this, the banks study or investigate the history of the entrepreneurs with regard to repayment of the loan. ከዚህ በፊት ምናልባት ተበድሮ በትክክል መልሷል አልመለሰም የሚለውን ሂስትሪ ያጠናል። በትክክል ያልመለሰ ሌላ ባንክ ተበድሮ ሌሎችም ባንኮች በትክክል ብድሩን ያልከፈለ ሰው ከሆነ አበድሩትም ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ሁለተኛው ሲሚሊዮናል ካፓሲቲያቸውን ቼክ ያደርጋሉ። ሌላው ኮላተራል ነው። ፕሪቪሌጅ ሪሶርስ አለ የለውም የሚለውን ነገር ቼክ ያደርጋሉ። if you don't have any asset that the owner pledged to have the loan or privileged resources or collateral resources. So the bank refused to provide loan. So in this case, to get a bank loan, you have to show a good capacity in repayment of the loan, and you have to provide a good privileged resources or collateral resources, and you have to show some character. So the evaluation of the character frequently is based on the intangible factors such as honesty, competency, willingness to negotiate with the bank. ሌላው እንግዲህ ያው ጸባይ ነው የሚያጠኑት። እንግዲህ ጸባይ ሲባል አንዳንድ ሰው ታማኝ ይሆናል፣ ታማኝ ያልሆነ ሰው አለ፣ ኮምፒተንት ነው ወይ፣ ከባንኩ ጋር ኔጎሺዬት ለማድረግ ፈቃደኛ ነው ወይ የሚሉት ነገሮች ያጠናሉ ማለት ነው። ኮምፒተንት ተወዳዳሪ ሆኖ ካገኙት፣ ኦነስት እንግዲህ ያው ታማኝ ሆኖ ካገኙት፣ ከባንኩ ጋር ለመደራደር ፈቃደኛ ሆኖ ካገኙት ብድሩን ይሰጡታል ማለት ነው። which is the character is the most important thing in banking industry. And the condition. So the last criteria for banks should be the condition. So this condition indicates, when you start a business, the bank also study the market, the growth of the market. If the market potential is good, so the bank will provide the loan. If the competition is, very strong in the market, the bank, refuse to, refuse the loan. Because, when the competition is high, so who will make the price? The market. So when the market is the price maker, so you will be the price taker. So in this case, you will not have, different competitive advantage over the market. So in this case, so the bank will study different conditions about the market, about the condition, about the location. Location is important for the success of any business. So in this case, if the location is appropriate, so the bank will provide the loan. If the location is not appropriate, the bank will hold the loan. So in this case, the other is the purpose of the loan is one other important condition. For what purpose you are going to get the money? Just for operating activity or for purchasing fixed asset or just for personal house or personal credit. So they need to identify the purpose of the loan. So depending on the purpose of the loan, the location, the competition, and the market, so they can provide the money. So these 5 criteria should be fulfilled to get money from the banks. So what's the challenging criteria for most of the time for entrepreneurs, which is the collateral. The most challenging condition for entrepreneurs. So the other forms of loan could be trade credits. So you can get some amount of raw material from suppliers on credit basis. And you can produce the product, sell the product, and finally you can repay the account payable for the creditors or simply for suppliers. እንግዲህ አንዱ የመበደሪያ ፎርም ትሬድ ክሬዲት ይባላል። ይሄ ማለት ሮ ማቴሪያል በጥሬ አውጥተን ብር ሳንከፍል ከሰፕላየሮቻችን ኦን ክሬዲት ቤዚስ ማለት ነው። ያው እንግዲህ ሴልስ በሁለት ነገር ነው የሚካሄደው። ምናልባት ማንኛውም ድርጅት በሁለት መንገድ ሊሸጥ ይችላል። ኦን ካሽ ቤዚስ ኦር ኦን ክሬዲት ቤዚስ። ክሬዲት ቤዝ ማለት እንግዲህ አሁን ብር የለኝም እቃውን ወስጄ ሰርቼ እከፍላችኋለሁ ብሎ መበደር ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ብዙ ጊዜ አንተርፕረነሮች ከሰፕላየሮቻቸው ይበደራሉ ማለት ነው። በማቴሪያል ይወስዳሉ እቃውን ሰርተው ሽጠው ሲጨርሱ የሮ ማቴሪያል ክፍያ ይመልሰው ይከፍላሉ ማለት ነው። ያው እንግዲህ ሰፕላየሮች ሴልስ ተርምስ ኤንድ ኮሚሽንስ ይባላላቸው። ለ30 ቀን ሽያጭ ሊሰጧችሁ ይችላል፣ ለ90 ቀን ለ60 ቀን እየተባለ ሊሰጥ ይችላል ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ በ30 ቀን ውስጥ ሰርተሽ ሽጠህ መልስልኝ ልትባሉ ትችላላችሁ። በ60 ቀን በ90 ቀን ሊባል ይችላል ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ on trade credit you can get money from suppliers. Equipment suppliers, most of the time you can purchase on credit basis. ለምሳሌ equipment በሊዝ ልታመጡ ትችላላችሁ ወይም ቀስ ያላችሁ የምትከፍሉት ሊሆን ይችላል ማለት ነው። equipment ማሽነሪ ብትፈልጉ ማሽነሪውን በክሬዲት ቤዝ ወስዳችሁ ከሰፕላየሮቻችሁ ላይ እዛ እየሰራችሁ የቆም ዋጋ ትከፍላላችሁ። this is a form of loan. The other is account receivable financing. This is short-term financing that involves either a pledge of receivables as a collateral for a loan. ምናልባት account receivable ማለት እቃን on credit basis እናንተ ሲሸጡት account receivable ይኖራቸዋል ማለት ነው። on credit basis ሲሸጡት ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ እናንተ የገዛችሁ ሰው account payable ይኖርበታል፣ የሚከፈል ዕዳ ይኖርበታል። እናንተ ደግሞ የምትቀበሉት ብር ይኖራቸዋል ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ያን እንቀበላለን ያላችሁትን account receivable is an agreement between the buyer and the seller. So you can take the account receivable as a collateral to receive some amount of money. This is considered as collateral. Account receivable is simply an agreement between the buyer and the seller. So this is a condition on which the buyer will make some amount of payment after some time. So this agreement is considered as a collateral to get some amount of loan. So you can take loan or some amount of money using this account receivable. Or we can get money from credit union. So account receivable, credit union, or in some cases, you can issue a bond. But in Ethiopian case, the government organizations are not responsible in selling bond, or large corporations. But all over the world, even if the business is small, they can issue a bond. The bond is a contractual agreement between the lender and the investor. You may be familiar with what's bond. You can borrow money through bond, issuing some indebtedness of agreement or promise. The promise to repay the amount of money with some interest. Maybe bond may be issued with interest or interest free. But most of the bonds are issued with an interest upon interest rate. So bond is an agreement also, a formal agreement. Now what bond የገዛ ሰው ካለ ያስታውሳል። bond simply it's an agreement between the lender and the business. The business promised to pay after the maturity date with an interest rate. So in this case, you can take the bond as a source of finance. This is the case on which so you can make some amount of loan or some amount of equity. There are two sources of finance: equity finance and loan finance or debt finance. So in this case, you can read this case and fill these questions. Borrowing from relatives, loan from banks, loan from microfinance institution, MFI, loan from venture capitalists, or the village saving and loan association. ወይም ምናልባት እንግዲህ አካባቢያችን ላይ አበዳሪ አሶሲዬሽኖች ካሉ በእኛ ሀገር አጠራር ምናልባት ቪሌጅ ሴቪንግ ኤንድ ሎን አሶሲዬሽን ማለት እቁብ ወይም እድር እንደማለት ነው። ስለዚህ እነዚህ ነገሮች ታነቧቸዋላችሁ እና እስኪ እናንተ እንትን ያላችሁትን እኛ ሀገር ውስጥ ፕራክቲካሊ የሆኑ ለማየት which source of finance is excellent, which source of finance is very good, which source of finance is average, which source of finance is difficult to implement in our case or in Japan case. ለዚህ ነገሮች አንብቧቸውና just for yourself. It's not an assignment, but I will ask you. This is a practice question. Which source of finance is excellent in Japan case, in your context or in your opinion? Borrowing from relative, loan from bank, loan from financial, loan from cooperative, or loan from personal saving or business people. Business people is most of the time they are angel capitalists. Angel. So in this case, rate this source of finance in your own opinion. So tell me which source of finance is important for entrepreneurs once you rate, depending on the score. So you can recommend someone to use either loan from bank, loan from microfinance institution, loan from village saving and loan association, or loan from business people. So you can recommend. መብራትኛ በየለም በጀነሬተር ነው 6 ሰዓት ከምናምን ይጠፋልና ምናልባት ሳልጨርስላችሁ እንዳይጠፋ እስኪ ጥያቄ ካላችሁ can you tell me the difference between loan from banks and loan from microfinance institution? What's their major difference?
Okay. ባንክስ የመጀመሪያ አላማቸው ወለድ ስለሚኖር ፕሮፊት ያገኛሉ። ለኢንተርፕረነር ሲያበድሩ ሰክሰስፉል ከሆኑ ሞር የነሱ ሰክሰስፉል መሆን ላይ ሳይሆን ብድሩን አመቻችተው ገንዘባቸውን እስከነወለዱ መቀበላቸው ላይ ነው ሞር ፎከስ የሚያደርጉ። በት እነዚህ ኢንተርፕራይዞች ግን ሞር ስራ አጥ የሚባለውን ኦር ደግሞ ያንግ የሚባለውን አንኤምፕሎይንግ ፓርት በማበደር ሞር ፎከስ የሚያደርጉት ገንዘቡ መመለሱ ላይ ሳይሆን ስራ ማስያዙ ላይና ሰክሰስፉል መሆናቸው ላይ።
Okay. If they need the money repaid, what's their criteria to repay the loan? ለምሳሌ ባንኮች ብድራቸው እንዲመለስላቸው 5 ሲያስቀምጠዋል ያን ሁሉ አጥንተው ይሰጣሉ መያዣው ዋናው ደግሞ ምንድነው ኮላተራል ነው what's the collateral for microfinance institution ሁላችሁም ፓርቲሲፔት አድርጉና አሁን ለምሳሌ ባንኮች ፕሪቪሌጅድ ሪሶርስ የሚላቸው መያዣ ያደርጋሉ ብሩባት መልሱ ቤቱን ባራጅ ይሸጣሉ መኪናውን ይሸጣሉ ወይም ለራሳቸው ያደርጋሉ privileged resource collateral ስላላቸው microfinance institution ግን እዚህ አይነት collateral አይጠይቁም ግን ሌላ መጠየቂያ collateral አላቸው ምንድነው እስኪ ያ collateral so one of the collateral for microfinance institution is a group you have to come up with a group security is their collateral group so the third forms of lease finance is leasing so you can get some amount of finance using leasing techniques lease a long term contractual agreement ለምሳሌ መሬት ቢፈልግ አንድ ድርጅት በምንድነው ሊገዛ የሚችለው in our context lease ነው በሊዝ ይገዛል ስለዚህ አንዱ ፋይናንስ የሚያደርጉበት መሬትን በሊዝ በመግዛት በሊዝ ከሆነ ደግሞ contractual agreement for a long period of time so the payment is for a long period of time there is a leasee and a lessor lessor means someone who provide the money or the facility the machinery or the building or the land lessee means someone who take that contractual agreement ሁለት ፓርቲ ነው የሚኖረው ሊዝ ሌዘር ይባላል ውሉን የሚሰጠው ሌሲ ይባላል ውሉን የሚቀበለው ሰው ማለት ነው ስለዚህ በመካከላቸው ሊዝ ሬንታል ፔመንት ይኖራል ማለት ነው ኦነርሺፕ አይተላለፍ ለምሳሌ አንድ ድርጅት መሬቱን ሲገዛ መሬቱ በሊዝ ነው የሚገዛው የኢትዮጵያ ኬዝ 90 አመት እንደዛ መሰለኝ አጥተኛ አይደለም ግን አንድ ሰው መሬት ሲገዛ በሊዝ ነው ያ ለምሳሌ ቤት የሰራችሁበት ለምሳሌ እናንተ ቤተሰቦች ነው እናንተ ትችላላችሁ የሰራችሁበት መሬት በሊዝ ነው ማንኛውም ቢዝነስ መሬት ሲወስድ በሊዝ ነው that's a long term contractual agreement so the payment is distributed over this period so in this case this is a kind of lease agreement ለምሳሌ አንድ ሰው ትልቅ ማሽን መግዛት የማይችል ከሆነ ሊዝ ያደርጋል በዚህ ነው ያላመት ከራይ ያለው ብሎ ማለት ስለዚህ ለአራት አመት ሊሆን ይችላል ለአምስት አመት ሊሆን ይችላል ለአንድ አመት ሊሆን ይችላል ለምሳሌ አውሮፕላን መግዛት ባንችል አውሮፕላን እናደርጋለን እንከራያለን ማለት ነው for a long period ስለዚህ ሊዝ ይባላል ማለት ነው ስለዚህ በሊዝ ምን ማድረግ ይቻላል ፋይናንስ ማድረግ ይቻላል ማለት ነው ስለዚህ next time we see different types of lease finance lease capital lease equipment lease land lease building lease there are different types of lease so in this case we'll discuss each in detail next time you can raise any question from raising ambiguity ጥያቄ ካላችሁ መጠየቅ ትችላላችሁ ጥያቄ ከሌላችሁ መውጣት ትችላላችሁ
يلي سمعت
سمع
ቅድም እንትን ላይ ማለት ነው ስለ ክሬዲት ምናምን ነገር ስናወራ ክሬዲት ዩኒየን ላይ አውርተን ነበር እና ክሬዲት ዩኒየኖች ቆይ ክሬዲት ከሰጡ በኋላ እንዴት ነው እንትን የሚልበት መንገድ ማለት ነን ፕሮፊት ናቸው ሲባል እንዴት ነው?
ኖርማሊ ነን ፕሮፊት አይደሉም ክሬዲት ዩኒየኖች። ክሬዲት ዩኒየኖች የማበደሪያ እንትናቸው ምንድነው? መጀመሪያ ሜምበር መሆን አለብህ ነው የክሬዲት ዩኒየኖች እና መንዝሊ ኮንትሪቢዩት የምታደርገው ይኖራል መንዝሊ በዛ ነው። አሁን ለምሳሌ አንተ ደሞዝተኛ ብትሆንና የአንድ ድርጅት ክሬዲት ዩኒየን ለምሳሌ የናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ሰራተኛ ሆነ ክሬዲት ዩኒየን ይኖራል ኮሌጁ ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ እዛ ኮሌጅ ላይ ምን ይኖራል ማለት ነው? ደሞዝ በየወሩ እየተቆረጠ ለክሬዲት ዩኒየኑ ኮንትሪቢዩት ታደርጋለህ something 10% ሊሆን ይችላል 5% ሊሆን ይችላል it depends on the policy and procedures of the union። ከዛ በኋላ በዛች ባጠራቀም ኮንትን ምን መውሰድ ትችላለህ? ብድር መውሰድ ትችላለህ if you want to start a new business። ስለዚህ ልክ ብድሩን ከሰጠ በኋላ ደግሞ ምን ላይ እየተቆረጠ ይመጣል ማለት ነው? ደሞዝ ላይ እየተቆረጠ ይመጣል ማለት ነው።
ልዩነት መፍጠር ዓላማችን ነው። ዓለም አቀፍ ተወዳዳሪ መሆን አለባችሁ። የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ጥራትና ደረጃውን የጠበቀ ስልጠና በመስጠት ብቁ ዜጋ እያፈራን ነው። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆቴልና ቱሪዝም ሙያዎች አሰልጥነን ተወዳዳሪ እናደርጎታለን። ኮሌጃችን ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ICM ጋር በመተባበር ዓለም አቀፍ ዕውቅና ያለው ስልጠና እየሰጠ ይገኛል። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን በበረራ መስተንግዶ የምንሰጣቸው ስልጠና ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና አለው። አድራሻ ከጎላጉል ታወር 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።